An image like no other, inspiring decades of research and debate. The Shroud of Turin, that's a piece of history.
2,000 years later, the Shroud still holds its secrets. Science can't explain it, history can't dismiss it, and faith won't let it go. Maybe it's legend, maybe it's proof. Either way, what's printed on that cloth is still asking the same question. Are we ready for the answer? Over the years, scientific technology has pressed deeper into its fibers, uncovering unexpected findings that challenge both faith and skepticism. What lies buried in its weave, hidden for nearly 2 millennia, has raised questions that reach beyond religion and into the very realm of the unexplained. First appearances. A French knight named Geoffroy de Charny displayed the Shroud of Turin in the year 1354 in the city of Lille, France. This is considered to be the earliest known presentation of the shroud from a widely accepted perspective. The validity of the item was called into question by a local bishop, who was of the opinion that it was a painting. Among the historical documents that date back to the latter part of the 14th century are letters that purport an artist to have admitted to having made the image. Nevertheless, no such artist was ever recognized, and there was no record of that confession that was kept and preserved. After some time, the fabric was eventually acquired by the House of Savoy in the year 1453, and it was transferred to Turin in the year 1578. It was able to withstand a severe fire that occurred in 1532. During the fire, molten silver from its container trickled through the cloth, producing damage that can still be seen today. Despite this, the flames did not harm the image that was in the center of the picture. Some academics are of the opinion that the origins of the cloth can be traced back much further than medieval Europe. According to them, there are allusions in early Christian scriptures that indicate burial cloths that are thought to have been wrapped around Jesus after he was crucified. The linen cloths that were found in the tomb are described in the biblical book of John. An image of Christ that was not created by human hands is mentioned in a manuscript that dates back to the 3rd or 4th century and is referred to as the Doctrine of a Die. This document makes a possible reference to what was later referred to as the Image of Edessa. A number of scholars contend that the shroud and that image might be the same thing, with the shroud being gradually concealed and relocated over the course of several centuries. According to the records kept by the Byzantines, the mandilion, which was a piece of cloth that depicted a face, was brought to Constantinople in the year 944. The Church of St. Mary of Blacherney in Constantinople was the location where various chroniclers reported seeing a burial cloth that had an image of a man who had been crucified. This cloth was stored during the Fourth Crusade in the year 1204. This fabric disappeared at the sacking of the city, and some researchers believe that it eventually reappeared in France more than a century after it had been lost. In spite of the fact that it has not been demonstrated beyond a reasonable doubt, this apparent continuity links the shroud to 1,000 years earlier than was previously believed. Details of the image and crucifixion clues. The image on the cloth depicts both the front and back of a man. Notably, the image is devoid of any pigmentation or dye. Under microscopic observation, the image does not penetrate deeply into the fibers. Instead, it affects only the top layers of the linen fibrils. It's as if the coloration occurred without any liquid application. The figure shows markings consistent with crucifixion, including small wounds around the scalp resembling punctures, abrasions on the shoulders consistent with carrying a heavy object, blood marks on the wrists, not palms, and a wound on the side of the torso. Characteristics of scourge marks are visible across the back, suggesting an object similar to a Roman flagrum was used. 2 or 3 leather straps with metal or bone tips. Blood stains on the cloth have been analyzed and identified as human blood. Dr. Alan Adler, a biochemist, and Dr. John Heller, in their detailed study during the 1978 Shroud of Turin research project, STURP, confirmed the presence of hemoglobin and serum separation, indicating blood expelled under traumatic conditions. Interestingly, ultraviolet fluorescence photography revealed that the blood traces differ from the image areas, meaning the blood was present on the cloth before the body image was transferred. That suggests a sequence. The body bled onto the linen, and only afterwards did some unknown process create the image. One of the most debated features is that the blood appears near the wrists rather than the palms. Most classical art depicts nails through the palms, but forensic and historical studies have shown that nails through the palms would likely tear under the weight of a crucified body, whereas placement through the wrists supports suspension. This fact was not commonly known until modern medical examinations phase in the 20th century, strongly arguing against a medieval forgery. How would an artist in the 1300s have depicted anatomical details that only recent forensic analysis would validate? Scientific study and radiocarbon testing. In the year 1978, a group of researchers who were known as STURP were given access to the fabric that had never been seen before. They carried out a large number of non-destructive investigations, taking photographs of it using a variety of spectrum, such as X-ray, ultraviolet, and infrared. A variety of foreign substances, including paint, pigment, dye, and ink, were examined by them. Following careful consideration, they came to the conclusion that the image does not contain any known artistic media. They discovered no brushstrokes, no transport medium, and no evidence that the picture entered the fibers. The coloration appeared to be confined to the surface of individual fibrils rather than the threads as a whole. In spite of these findings, a radiocarbon test was carried out in 1988 by laboratories located in Tucson, Arizona, Oxford, England, and Zurich, Switzerland. The test was carried out with small samples that were cut from one corner of the cloth. The material was dated to between 1260 and 1390, which indicates that it originated during the medieval period. These findings were initially reported by a large number of people and looked to be definitive. On the other hand, later research brought up significant problems regarding the location of the sample. After some time had passed, textile specialists contended that the sample that was collected was from a part that had probably been polluted by medieval repair, possibly through invisible reweaving with more recent fabric. Researchers such as Ray Rogers conducted additional forensic textile analysis, which led them to the conclusion that the radiocarbon samples contained cotton fibers and dye, which is not consistent with the traditional composition of linen. Therefore, if the piece that was tested was not indicative of the entire shroud, the dating may not accurately reflect the age at which it was created. Radiocarbon dependability may be affected by contamination and exposure that has occurred over the course of centuries due to exhibition and handling, which adds another layer of complexity. There is a school of thought that contends that carbon gets introduced into the dating process when it is exposed to environmental conditions, including fire. In their response to the findings from 1988, members of STURP emphasized that radiocarbon dating only examined one component of the phenomenon, and that numerous other scientific studies refute the idea that the phenomenon originated in the Middle Ages. Microscopic and chemical analysis. According to the findings of an investigation that was carried out by Ray Rogers, a chemist working at Los Alamos National Laboratory, samples that were taken prior to the radiocarbon study in 1988 revealed that the fibers from the sections that contained the images did not have any sign of pigment and were chemically comparable to ancient linen. In addition, Rogers discovered traces of vanillin, which is an organic chemical that is present in more recent linen but is not present in earlier linen. After analyzing the amounts of vanillin decomposition, it was determined that the shroud might be anywhere between 1300 and 3000 years old. The presence of vanillin in places that were not contained in the picture and radiocarbon samples lends credence to the hypothesis that the dated region was the result of a later repair. According to the findings of further investigation, the body picture did not emerge in regions where there was blood present. Consequently, this indicates that the image was produced after the blood was deposited, which further emphasizes that the image did not originate from an applied pigment, but rather from an imprinting mechanism that is previously unknown. In addition to that, the researchers found high-resolution three-dimensional data contained inside the image. The shroud image created a perfect three-dimensional relief when it was analyzed using technology that was developed for NASA and utilized in the VP8 image analyzer. In contrast, photographs and paintings failed to produce that kind of relief when subjected to identical testing. Not only did it mean that the intensity of an image related to visual shading, but it also meant that it corresponded to spatial information, which was something that no known forging technique could generate throughout the medieval period. Analysis of the pollen and geographical origins. Professor Max Frey, a Swiss criminologist and botanist, conducted an analysis of pollen samples that were gathered from the surface of the shroud in the 1970s. He was able to identify pollen grains that were produced by plant species that were indigenous to the Middle East, including some that were unique to the districts surrounding Jerusalem. Desert regions of the Judean mountains are the only places where certain species can be found. In addition, pollen from plants that are indigenous to Turkey, France, and Italy was found, which corresponds to the known historical travels of the Shroud of Turin. There are around 58 different species of pollen, 17 of which are unique to the areas close to Jerusalem, according to Frey. In spite of the fact that his research was subject to criticism due to concerns over contamination, subsequent tests conclusively proved the existence of pollen from the Middle East. Furthermore, in the year 1999, an Israeli botanist named Avinoam Danon examined high-resolution photographs and recognized plant images on the fabric that were consistent with species that were growing in the Jerusalem area during the months of March and April. Danon saw impressions that he thought were similar to flowers in the head area. These impressions corresponded to particular types of flora that bloomed around the time of Passover. Based only on the data provided by the plants, he came to the conclusion that the shroud must have originated in the region surrounding Jerusalem. Bloodstain analysis and medical interpretation. A number of specific characteristics were detected by medical professionals who analyzed the photograph. These included clots of blood surrounding the wounds, blood from scourging marks that were consistent with a whip that was tipped with metal bits, abrasions on the knees, and bruising on the shoulders that indicated carrying a large object of some kind. AB is a rather uncommon blood type, and it is also the blood type that was discovered on the Sudarium of Oviedo, which is another Christian relic that is believed to have covered Jesus' face. These findings were based on a study that was conducted in 1995 by Dr. Pierluigi Baima Bologna. However, some earlier studies showed that the blood was type O. The crucifixion stance is suggested by the patterns of blood flow located on the arms. Given the angle and direction of the blood flow, it may be deduced that the arms were elevated significantly above the head. This is compatible with the position of a crucified victim before death, according to the results of forensic pathologists who examined the body. Asphyxiation is a known deadly mechanism in crucifixion, and the bleeding from the side wound shows a separation of blood and clear fluid, which indicates pleural effusion or pericardial fluid. This is something that is related to death by dissipation. Furthermore, the fabric is present with bilirubin, which is a chemical that is discharged during acute trauma, such as severe scourging or physical suffering prior to death. The presence of bilirubin, which was validated by research conducted by Adler and Heller and published in 1981, is evidence that the blood was taken from a person who had severe injuries prior to their death. Image formation theories. It is possible that the most perplexing mystery is the manner in which the image was able to materialize on the fabric. In the conventional sense, the image is not painted, colored, or burned before being displayed. According to study conducted using a microscope, the only fibrils of the linen fibers that are discolored are the outermost ones. Evidence of oxidation, dehydration, and conjugation can be seen in their appearance. Among the hypotheses that have been put forward is the Maillard reaction, which proposes that amino vapors from a decomposing body participated in a chemical reaction with the carbohydrate layers of the linen, resulting in the formation of a scorch-like image. Experiments conducted by chemist Ray Rogers showed that he was able to replicate similar effects in laboratory settings with some degree of success, but these experimental results could not match the highly realistic facial image. Another theory proposes the possibility of energy discharge or radiation bursts. In studies modeled after ultraviolet radiation effects, Italian scientists led by Paolo Di Lazzaro suggested that high-intensity UV lasers could produce coloration on linen fibers similar to the shroud image, but only using energy levels far beyond current technology. As a result of this, they came up with the hypothesis that the generation of the image could be explained by a sudden surge of energy, which could be connected to an unidentified physical phenomena. Despite the fact that their findings were not conclusive, they did illustrate that a natural or unknown high-energy process might possibly cause the superficial fiber discoloration without causing the fabric to be burned through. The interpretation that the body emitted some kind of radiant energy at the moment of death is not supported by science, despite the fact that some people believe that this interpretation happened. In their final report from 1981, Stirp came to the conclusion that there was no known mechanism that might have been responsible for the formation of the image, which left the question of its genesis unsolved. Textile analysis and cloth construction. According to the study of the linen, the fabric was woven in a herringbone twill pattern, which is a unique and luxurious form that was connected with the manufacturing of high-quality linen throughout the 1st century. Textiles at Israel's Masada stronghold that date back to the same time period have been discovered to have a pattern that is very similar to this one. The composition of the thread and the weaving technique are more in line with techniques that are known to have been utilized in ancient Syria and Palestine than they are with those used in medieval Europe. The case for a medieval origin is further complicated by the fact that the style of the cloth and the radiocarbon date are inconsistent with one another. In addition, researchers discovered traces of cotton fibers in certain regions, notably Gossypium herbaceum, a kind of cotton that is indigenous to the Middle East. During the medieval period in Europe, cotton was typically derived from a different kind of cotton. Taking into consideration these textile features, it appears that at least some of the fabric originated in the Middle East. Iconographic influence and early representations. There have been a number of studies that have compared the image of the face on the shroud to early Byzantine iconography and discovered incredible similarities. Over 170 points of similarity have been identified by researchers between the face of the shroud and the Christ Pantocrator icon that was found in St. Catherine's Monastery on Mount Sinai in the 6th century. These ancient paintings show characteristics that are compatible with the image seen on the shroud, such as the space between the eyes, the shape of the cheekbones, and even a slight absence of symmetry. A number of academics contend that early Christians had access to an image of Christ, which may have been drawn from the shroud, which influenced the manner in which they depicted his face through their artwork. In the event that this is true, it would imply that the shroud was in existence much before the medieval period. Scientific consensus and ongoing research. In spite of the many research that have been conducted, the shroud is still officially unexplained. According to the conclusion statement that Stirp issued in 1981, the image is not the product of any known artistic method. It was discovered that there was no paint, dye, acid, or brush application. Researchers confirmed, we can conclude for now that the shroud image is that of a real human form, and that the blood marks are from real human blood. In addition to this, they added that the answer to how the image was produced, or what produced it, remains now, as it has in the past, a mystery. Despite the fact that it is not officially recognized as a relic of Christ's burial garment, the Vatican considers the shroud to be an artifact that is worthy of devotion. As Pope Benedict XVI put it, it is an icon written in blood. Pope John Paul II referred to it as a mirror of the gospel. Pope Benedict XVI similarly defined it. However, the Church does not need adherents to believe in the legitimacy of its teachings. New approaches to analyzing the shroud are being developed as technology continues to evolve. It was proposed in 2022 by researchers who were employing X-ray fluorescence that elemental analysis may potentially allow for more accurate dating without causing any damage to the fabric. Based on their preliminary findings, it appears that the fabric may be substantially older than the medieval period, possibly reaching back to the 1st century CE. Additional research that has been examined by experts is now being conducted. The remaining questions. Numerous investigations have been conducted, yet the Shroud of Turin continues to defy a definitive scientific explanation. With anatomical precision, forensic consistency, and chemical qualities that suggest profound suffering, it gives the impression of carrying the picture of a man who has been crucified. The bloodstains are from real blood and were already present on the fabric before the image appeared. Coloration is only superficially present in the fibers. There is no pigmentation or penetration. Pollen traces from Jerusalem, textile evidence from the 1st century Middle East, and chemical aging that is incongruous with medieval fabric are all found on the fabric. Radiocarbon testing, on the other hand, indicates that the 13th or 14th century occurred, which results in a paradox that has not been resolved. Is it possible that the fabric in question was the burial shroud of Jesus of Nazareth, which had been preserved for millennia? Another possibility is that it is a natural event that occurs only once in a millennium and flawlessly replicates every forensic element of crucifixion. Whether it was the result of natural decay, advanced ancient technology, or an unidentified flash of energy, the image was made. All of the responses appear to be lacking. The shroud continues to be a riddle that has been begging to be investigated, and the more one looks into it, the more profound the mystery gets. What has been discovered after 2,000 years is not irrefutable evidence, but unmistakable complexity. It is a collision of history, science, and faith that somehow stamped itself onto cloth, leaving behind not a legend, but a conundrum that is waiting to be solved. If this left you questioning history, faith, and science, don't stop here. Hit like, subscribe, and drop your thoughts below, because the next revelation might be even more unbelievable, and you won't want to miss when it finally comes to light.